New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert over here.
Rev BRZ right here.
And this is New Thought today on the New Thought Media Network. I'm having a little bit of audio difficulty, so I cannot hear anybody. But that's okay. Because I could figure that out a little bit as we go along until I can hear you. So just hang tight for me there, Z. Folks, this is a program comes to you every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. here on the New Thought Media Network. We get a chance to come together and really be together in a way where we're looking at the future of New Thought, of where New Thought is headed, and what some of the possibilities might be for New Thought as we move forward. So let's try and say hello again. I'll see if I've got some audio this time, Z.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here talking all things science of mind.
Yes, exactly. So, all right. And this week, what we'd like to bring to you is something a little bit different. We're going to add a page here to the screen so you can see it. There it is. The Science of Mind Archives is a really cool place to hang out if you like to learn about the history of the science of mind. And Reverend Kathy Mastriani does a great job of curating up there, keeping things running. And what we're going to do over the next handful of weeks or so is we're going to begin to look at a piece of material from the earliest stages of truly science of mind. And this is not necessarily not New Thought. This is where Ernest starts to bring his teachings into a correspondence type course and the extension course. So it was meant to be all studied in a week. We don't think we're going to get through we know we're not going to get through the whole first week in the next hour. No way about it. But we are going to look at some various aspects of it. And over the coming weeks, we are going to look at these as well. So if you would like, we will make sure that we drop that that we drop a link in our show notes and in our comments of today's broadcast of where you can go pick up that book, the hard copy book of the first 12 weeks, which is what we're working with and where we're coming from today. So I think I got everything there, Z, yes?
Yeah, I think you got everything. I mean, there's 12 lessons, but they're broken down into segments. So I'll just tell everybody, fasten up, get a notebook, and take some notes and get some references, and let's go to work.
Yeah, and our intent is to update and bring forward these lessons into a more contemporary voice, and a more contemporary teaching and a more contemporary understanding. And therefore, we were joking before the episode today that these writings may only be 60 or 70, 80 years old now, wherever it's been, but maybe we're a little over 100 years on some of this stuff. The point is, it was written in a time and in a time frame where I believe Ernest used the most inclusive language that was available to him. That language was still very gender specific and very binary in that regard. We, both Reverend Elzia and I, have made a pledge to transcend that and to reword these writings as we go. We may stumble. There may be a couple of gender-specific terms that drop out of our mouths in those places as we're reading specific text. But please know that in most cases, we are going to change that language and move into a more inclusive use of the language. So if you do have the book and you're following along, you will most likely notice those changes as we go. And we both invite you to go ahead and make any changes you like to that languaging in the book directly. It's a great way to make sure moving forward, we are all practicing that more inclusive and that most inclusive language that's available to us today. And if you have any questions about that, please drop them in the comments. We'll be happy to chat about it. All right, Z, let's dig in. The big thing, we wanted to start on page 10, at the very bottom of the page, with the section that says, what is the science of mind? However, as I've taught for many years, just like any good Holmesian, if you find a nugget of truth you like about Dr. Holmes, make sure you back up a couple paragraphs and see what he was saying to set up to get you to that point. So I know you found the paragraphs right before this very interesting and telling to help set us up for our conversation today. Please go ahead and share those with the audience.
Sure. So when we look at the science of mind, we're looking at how we create and remake our worlds and our visions and our perception of things. And so in the section before, which is on creation, there's this statement that says, thought is always passing into the varieties of manifestations that fill our universe. And so since we know our universe is created from these thought patterns, these energy packets of thought, this statement, I think, becomes very true, which is the last paragraph. I'm not going to skip through. I'm not going to read it word for word. It says, it's true when we understand that the universe is this manifestation of the various thoughts that we have. It is true that our mind is a reproduction of the divine mind operating on the scale of individual perception. And it goes on to say, it is precisely here that the difficulty comes in. Since we cannot escape the creative power of our thoughts, we must temporarily be limited to such thought as we look to create a freedom and expansion of who and what we are. And that lies not in changing our attitudes, but it lies on changing our mental perception of our consciousness, and which will cause us to look at the world differently, and which will create a different vision of reality. And now that was a lot. So just to summarize that is, since everything is created by thought, and we sometimes do not recognize, understand, or acknowledge that we are a mini me of the divine mind, we sometimes get confused about what our power is and how we have the ability to create on scale. And that the only way to do that is to change our mental attitude first about who and what we are. Yep. And then second, about what we have the ability to do when we connect with that divine mind. And then that will give us a whole new perception, outlook on life, and a new declaration of what reality is.
Yes. And for me, that leads me right to that conclusion that, so I have the power to create my reality.
Yes.
I have within me the power to create the life I truly desire. And what Holmes jumps into right at the bottom of page 10, he starts to explain, well, what is the science of mind then? Because if we're going to operate from this base premise, and this is the base premise of the science of mind.
Yep.
We have this power, but we have to learn how to use it constructively, use it towards the good, towards freedom, towards love. As we're going to explore today, and as these early paragraphs have already even stated, that if we're trying to use this towards other nefarious ends, things aren't always going to go according to plan, and definitely aren't going to work as easily. But when we're in alignment with all of this, That's when it starts to get really fun. So at the bottom of page 10, Holmes launches us off with this great first statement. And if you're new to reading Holmes or listening to this, he often will make a pretty declarative statement straight up in the early part of an argument or a presentation or a writing. It really hits home. Today, he says, the science of mind as taught in these lessons is an outgrowth of the spiritual faith. It isn't. We are an outgrowth of spiritual faith. And that means, first and foremost, we have to have and understand what spiritual faith is.
Mm-hmm.
Not only in our lives, but in the lives of the whole of the one, before any of this is really going to work for us. It might work by default. It might work by mistake. What's the old saying? Even a broken clock is wrong twice a day.
At least.
At least. I have a broken clock on my wall right now, and you're right, because it often changes how broken it is. Sorry, I digress. So join with us as we jump into page 11 here. I think that first paragraph on page 11 speaks volumes. The science of mind is comparatively new, but the mental experience of the invisible universe is as old as the history of man. There's never been a time where this truth has not been the truth. Right. And that's why we give it a capital T when we write about it as truth. It is new in that for the first time in history, we have put together all findings which contribute to the establishment of the human relationship with the universe, to the end that we may be able to apply this spiritual understanding to the everyday problems of life. So again, the science of mind is all about us being able to use a universal principle that has always existed, that could not possibly not exist, and applying that to what we perceive in the human design or the human level as a problem.
Yes. And I'm looking for this statement because I think for me that faith piece sometimes get misunderstood. And so I want to pop up this overlay real quick.
Yes.
Where it says faith does not always take you out of the problem. Faith takes you through the problem. Faith does not always take you away from the pain. Faith gives you ability to handle the pain. And then faith does not always take you out of the storm. Faith calms you in the midst of the storm. And so that is what we're working with, because again, what we're talking about is a mental attitude. We're talking about being able to change our perception, to change the way we look at things, and be able to see something that we didn't see before. And that is the essence of science of mind, religious science. There's a place in there where he says, before science even came up with all the laws and everything, whether it's on a metaphysical law where we start talking about some of the ethereal things of God and faith and spirit, or the physical laws, they already existed. Yeah. We didn't create these things because we created science. They existed. Science was just a tool to help us perceive them. And that's the essence of what Ernest is teaching here, and the essence of what we're trying to incorporate into every aspect of our life.
Yes. There's a point in my life where I stopped kind of using the word discovery, because I'm not discovering anything new. Science isn't discovering anything new. It's rediscovering a truth that has always been there. Mm-hmm. And that same process happens in our own lives. Mm-hmm. When I was first introduced to this philosophy, I was elated and excited and joyous because I and many of you out there I know have had this same thought. I was like, wow, wait a minute. There's people that think like I do. Mm-hmm. I didn't create the thought. I just tapped into it. Yeah. They didn't create the thought. They were just already thinking those thoughts. They had tapped into it from where and how far back can we go? As far back as you can imagine. And we're going to find this one absolute truth.
Yes.
Holmes says it this way. The proposition is that we are living in a spiritual universe whose sole government is one of harmony, and that the use of right ideas is the enforcement of its laws. As far back as you want to go in time, that thought is part of the plan, part of the interplay of life, if you will. And we can identify that in countless philosophers across time. So he continues here on page 11. The science of mind is built on the theory that there is one infinite mind. That thought we're talking about comes from this one infinite mind, which of necessity includes all that is, whether it be the intelligence in the human, the life of the animal, or the invisible presence, which is, as we define it, God.
Yeah.
In it, we learn to have a spiritual sense of things. The spiritual sense of things is what is meant by the consciousness of Christ. Now, remember, Holmes speaks in a language that was the most inclusive for him at the time. At the time, the consciousness of Christ was not a very well understood term. And even, I believe, those that profess to follow Christ may not have fully understood what is meant by the term the consciousness of Christ. He finishes that thought. To be able to discern the spiritual idea back of its physical symbol is to use the mind that Jesus used.
Yes.
It was also in the Christ consciousness, because Jesus is a representation of the Christ consciousness in physical form.
Yeah, and you know, in that paragraph just before that, that little small statement, if you will, is, I think, sets the foundation for that, where he says this science or this study or this way of looking at life and proceeding starts with the preposition that we live in a spiritual universe. Yep. Because what that sets up is it sets up a foundation of which everything emerges out of. So like you were saying earlier, for me, this whole thing about discovering and all that, we're looking at things emerging and emerging from this foundation of wealth, whether it's consciousness or health or abundance or the interrelatedness of life. And when we are able to understand that principle, then all things are possible. And that's what that Christ consciousness speaks of. It speaks of this whole idea of, if I can tap into the foundational consciousness, as much as Aaron just likes to say, as much as I can conceive, I can achieve. So the more I open myself up to the Christ consciousness and believe and have faith in that process of this spiritual universe, and quite frankly, whether we believe it or not, it's still there. Our belief is needed so that we can activate it and use it. So that's where that piece comes in.
Right. Our belief is necessary so we can activate it, utilize it in our own lives to address what some people will conceive as problems. I like to look at them as opportunities, adventures, and experiences, not all of which make me go jumping and dancing for joy, but all of which, upon deeper introspection, remind me that I have the power to wallow in that dis-ease, that unhappiness, or change my thinking, change my thoughts.
Yeah. And that next paragraph, he speaks this, and that this, I mean, to me, this is the thing that drew me to religious science of mind, is that he says the science of mind is intensely practical.
Yes.
Because it teaches us how to use the mind principle for definite purpose. And he gives a couple of examples, whether somebody's sick or impoverished or unhappy. Yep. You know, you add to that to create something that will benefit the world, to create prosperity, to create all manner of things, sits on that idea of the practical use of this invisible force that the consciousness of the universe is channeled through us when we open up to this idea.
Yes. Throughout this short piece of these lessons, Holmes will repeatedly, repeatedly, sometimes in the same paragraph, repeatedly admonish us to make sure we're using this to take action, to be good citizens, to use this in the world, not to sit around and proselytize and pontificate and theorize if this works or not. There has been enough discussion about whether this works. The bigger question is, how are we going to work it? How do you want to work it in your lives? Here at the New Thought Media Network, we're working that by creating this network, this body of people that are ready and able to discuss this, to serve you, to step out in the world. And you're going to see not only our community, but the communities we're working with. We have a whole banner of ideas and promotions and things coming where we're going to go out in the world. And we're re-emerging into society to take definitive action from a consciousness that was in Christ Jesus. And I know I won't upset you, Z, but I know I might upset some. But that same consciousness that was in the Christ Jesus is also in the Buddha, and also is in Muhammad and Kuan Yin, and truly in every one of us, if we want to and we choose to embody and embrace and express that.
Well, and he speaks to that where he talks about the power, right? So we can substitute this word power for God consciousness or for energy or any of these things, but the idea of a power, and let's just use energy as the example to bring it home, because most of us are familiar with that, in that it has already and always existed, right? The power of electricity has always existed, but the particular value of it has no use until we discover it, right? And then once we are conscious of the power, we still have to activate it. And that's the same thing with us. Once we understand that the power of God, the power of the divine spirit, which has sometimes been coined as a Christ consciousness from a Christian vernacular, but if you go to a Buddhist vernacular or a Hindu vernacular or Islamic vernacular, that language changes, but the energy and the concept remains the same. And when we can tap into that, we become a conduit, i.e., we become the thing itself, the consciousness of the universe, which allows us to be a mini me of divine, which allows us to create at will.
Yes. And therein is the fun, the ability to create at will. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here and go poof, and a gold brick is going to drop into my hand. But I have the ability to create my experience of whatever's going on in my day, of whatever's going on in my life, and whatever's going on in my business or my family. I'm free to create that experience based on what energetic vibration I want to bring to it.
Yeah.
Do I want to get pissed off, slam the door, and march down the street? Do I want to? Sometimes that's acceptable. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes that's a healthy release of a negative energy.
Yeah.
Or do I want to turn and be loving?
And the key to that is we get what we create. So it is sometimes definitely a valid way to go down the track. And I've done it a lot of times, but I also know that there's this law called cause and effect, that when I do that, I must, well, whether I'm ready or not, let me say that, I will get the reciprocal of that.
Right. Yes. And we get the reciprocal of it, and we get the opportunity to grow from that.
Yeah.
To say, okay, what story do I really want to tell myself about this? And truthfully, how can I now better utilize what I know as true, as this philosophy, in the creation of the life I truly desire? Because we all get stressed. Stressors break. I think of them as rubber bands. You stress a stretcher enough, sooner or later the stressor is going to break, and now we need a little repair. Now we need to tie that rubber band back together, or go get a new, however. When those are the moments, those are the times when using this philosophy is the most beneficial.
Yeah. And it's like that overlay we just had.
Yeah.
Faith doesn't always take you out of the problem. Faith takes you through the problem, because we know that there is a mind. We know that there's a way to embody the intelligence of the universe. And we have, how often have we heard the Einstein quote that says we can't solve the problem at the same level we created the problem? Well, we can change to create the problem. We can't get out of a situation with the same mindset that we've come into the situation that we're stuck in the first place. We got to look beyond that. We got to add some inclusive stuff to that. And when we do, boom, now the wheels begin to turn. And for those of us who are creative, whether you're artists or into coding or anything, or putting puzzles together, something as simple as that, which I'm thinking most people have done. How many times have you been trying to force a piece in? You get so frustrated, but you don't give up. You just walk away, and you come back and you walk in one day going to the refrigerator. Holy cow, I see it. Boom. And that one piece that you were struggling with allows you now to hit another 5-10 pieces of the puzzle, and the vision enlarges.
Yes. There is a power in that concept of surrender that I hear you speaking to, that
yes.
It's a real emotion. It's a real experience. It's a real stressor. The rubber band breaks, and I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go for a nap, or I'm going to go but what it does is it provides us that opportunity to recognize there has to be a bigger vision here. There has to be a bigger vision where that stressor isn't even a stressor any longer.
Right.
Where we never get to the point of that stressor pushing so hard there is a snap, there is a break in our own experience of the reality, the truth, the life we really desire.
And I love that, in contrast to what we said earlier, that when we get in these situations, I could storm out the door and slam the door, right? And then that's going to put me in a certain mindset as I'm going out the door. Or I could take a deep breath, as you just said, and take a walk out the door, which is going to put me in a whole nother mindset of how I handle that problem that we need to deal with. So it doesn't take me away from the problem. It just helps me get through the problem, because now I got two different mindsets. One that's more life affirming, one that's more looking at
a little more calm.
Yeah.
A little calm, had a chance to have a few deep breaths, all those things, right? Again, folks, our desire is always to look at how do we make this a practical application. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment, send us an email, info or ministertalk at ntmedia.org, either one. Reach out to either of us privately, or Facebook, anywhere it may be, because we believe these conversations are only here enough to inspire us to get out and do the work that's before us. We know this stuff works. Most likely you do too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's be in conversation about how we work this together to start to tackle some of the bigger concerns or human problems that we see out in the world. I want to bring us back to our text for a minute, because I think Holmes kind of speaks to this. On page 12, it's 6 paragraph. The science of mind reveals that everyone is a potential Christ, that everyone has inherent God power within. And how could this God power be used other than through our thoughts? Since it would be impossible for one to act as an intelligent being unless we could first think, the very idea of one supposing a center of consciousness, a center of thought activity. Blah, 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 blah. We're circling right back around to Holmes telling us that it's all about our thoughts. The science of mind reveals that this center of God activity within each one is a complete and unique manifestation of the parent mind, that the power of God does not actually exist in man. We want to make sure that we there's a piece here that can get real heady, I have found, in the science of mind. It's this belief that, wow, we have this power. We can go create everything that we want. We can create this idyllic world where there is this and this and this and this and even in the midst of that promise, Holmes reminds us to say, okay, and let's be humble about this. Let's remember that each one, no matter what everyone is doing, is right now a complete and perfect manifestation of the divine parent mind, of the divine.
Yeah.
So there's nobody broken out there. There's nothing wrong out there. There's nobody that needs to be fixed out there. Truthfully, even in our business, Z, there's nobody that needs to be healed out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the thing that you bring up for me on that is this whole idea that, you know, once we tap into that, we understand that with right ideas and correct understanding, that these cause us to grow, expand, and to gain knowledge of who and what we are. And so that expansion begins to get bigger, right? And the other thing I thought about was when you said that about us being we're like DNA descendants of the divine, right? So each one of us, just like if we did two brothers or two sisters or a brother and a sister, some of that DNA would be the exact same of their parents, but then some of it may not be, right? And they won't match the other, because that is the uniqueness of each and every one of us as God has created us to be.
Yes. And what we know is it all has to bend towards growth. It all has to bend towards the good, towards the expansion, towards the love. Everything else is an attempt to misuse these principles and this law and this power. It's an attempt to misuse that into the creation of an ego-based life or a manipulation of others or an attempt to gain some favor that isn't realistic.
Mm-hmm.
On page 13, Holmes continues in this. I'm going to read the second paragraph. In trying to seek a solution, we must either conclude that there is an ultimate good and an ultimate evil in the universe. So here's our proposition. There is either a both and, good and evil, or we must conclude that there is but one ultimate. Now, we could substitute the word God there, divine, anything you like there, but there is one ultimate, which is good. And that this ultimate, by its very nature and by our very nature, is compelled to appear to each one of us in the form of our belief. If you can accept this proposition, it will be easy enough for you to see how it is that false beliefs bind humanity.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, the only hell there is the one we create in our own mind. The only limit there is are the ones we create in our own mind. The only attacks in our lives are the ones we create in our own mind first.
Yeah, and because he makes a statement back on page 12, in paragraph 4, I think it is, where he says one of the fundamental propositions is that God is all there is. When you say God is all there is, that includes everything, all possibilities, and all actions. For spirit is the invisible essence and substance of all form. It is impossible to separate the highest use of this science from the most exalted concepts of an intimate spirit, a transcendent spirit, or an available spirit. So we have this allness that if we look at it from different perspectives, we begin to label them as good or bad. But in its allness, it's all one thing, and it's all this interchange between the divine and us to create a situation where we grow, expand, and gain knowledge so that we incorporate more. And those things that we thought were not congruent before, at a larger level, we begin to see, yes, they are congruent. I needed to step back a little bit, or I need to get a little closer to the situation to understand.
Yes. Yes. So even the politicians we don't agree with, folks, right? Even the neighbor down the street likes to mow their lawn at 2 a.m. That's not happening in my neighborhood. I just made that up. Whatever it might be, whatever it might be, we have the power to let that affect us or not. Now, truthfully, there's not an awful lot that it would appear I'm set up to do in the world of politics. I can complain about politics on the internet. I can post weird memes about politics on the internet. I can moan and groan about what some of the political figures in my home state are doing. And none of that's really going to make an awful lot of difference unless I decide to get involved and take inspired action.
Yeah.
If I do, then so be it. If that's your choice, then so be it. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing extra special about it either. The way we do what we do, we make these choices as to how we want to show up, and I believe work towards liberating ourselves from these false beliefs that create our bondage. It's been said that, and I love this by Reverend Dr. David Alexander. He shared a meme one day. It said, "I practice a radical personal liberation theology called New Thought." And I resonated with that immediately because in many ways, what we are talking about is fairly radical compared to what we're taught, or so many have been taught, in how to live a healthy life, a happy life, how to live a successful life. We're talking about liberating ourselves from the false beliefs that create these mental paradigms by which we limit ourselves. And when we do that, now we're free. Now we're really going to experience a freedom. And I want to touch base here on something Holmes says on 13. If that which binds is a false belief and not the truth, our proposition, then we will see why Jesus told us that a knowledge of the truth would produce freedom. A knowledge of the truth. He did not mean that knowledge of the truth creates freedom, but that knowledge of the truth makes us free by aligning us with that which was never bound. Yeah. By aligning us with that which was always true. That's where I see people get caught up, Z, is trying to get aligned with the truth.
Yeah. And you know, I just had this picture when you're talking about alignment, because I always get it, in that my daughter, she wants to learn how to drive a stick shift. And next time I get in the same place and can find a doggone stick shift,
call me, I'll come.
I'm going to get her to do that. But that idea of, I don't see the clutch and the stick shift when I'm trying to shift into another gear. There's a feeling of that alignment, and that when you click that thing in second gear from first gear, there's a little there. There's a little shimmy there that you feel that alignment. Yeah. And then once you feel that alignment, what do? You let go of that clutch. You let go of the gear shift. Boom. And it takes off and takes you to a next level of movement, next level of speed. And so that's the same thing I got from that, is that this alignment that we have to find, we have to get in tune with the inside to have that feeling of it and the faith that it will happen.
Yep. And, you know, folks, there's a great lesson in this. I love this, because in the old days, all you had were sticks, right? In the old days, and I know I'm starting to sound like an old man, but in the old days, it was a luxury to have an automatic, and you learned how to drive. You learned how to drive on a stick, and the older the vehicle, the more particular it could be, or the more work a vehicle it had done, the more precise you might have to be to make that thing keep moving. Otherwise, you would stall out. And in New Thought, in the old days, Well, you learned how to drive by driving a stick. You went to church. You went every Sunday. You got one lesson a week. Maybe if you were lucky, somebody created a tape you could take and listen to again at another time. Maybe you had a phone call. Today, we have the world of automatic spirituality. You just push the button and the thing will take you anywhere you want to go. You can get lost and be driving for 5 or 6 hours. Never even knew you were driving. 2:30 in the morning. I'm still up watching YouTube videos. I trust it bends towards the positive.
Yes.
But we have this opportunity in front of us. And I love that your daughter wants to learn how to drive stick. I love that we're exploring some of the very basic principles of this philosophy and some of the very earliest teachings of the science of mind. But the attempt is to be able to transmute that knowledge into our future.
Yeah.
Into what we're creating next. Right?
Yep. And he says on that page 13, he says this a little further down, he says, the science of mind provides us with a definite technique for use of this law and teaches how each one can use it in freeing himself and demonstrating to his complete satisfaction that right ideas correctly used can, and here's the kicker, and must produce right conditions.
Yes. Radical personal liberation theology.
Yes, exactly.
And we're going to use that new freedom, that new liberation to get in alignment with the divine truth, and thereby must demonstrate and manifest a higher expression, a more enlightened, evolved expression and experience of life.
A great example just popped into my mind. If I take a seed and put it on concrete, I can give it all the fertilizer and all of the good water and sunshine, but it's not in alignment there. Right. But if I put it in dirt, I don't even have to give it the best water or the best sunlight. It's in the right conditioning. It will grow. It has to grow because it has aligned itself with the right condition, the right atmosphere and everything for it to take root. And the better that condition and the better the alignment that seed finds itself in, the more it will produce the right plant condition, whatever the situation is that we're trying to grow or expand or understand. It's amazing.
And given even the tiniest slice of that right condition, the tendency is to grow in towards the positive, and that tiny seed will rip apart that concrete. Give it enough time, it'll come up through every crack of that, any imperfection, because the concrete represents the false beliefs. And if we find any crack in that false belief, any little thing that says, oh no, that ain't true, that ain't the way, that's not how any of this works, then we can use that positive, then we can use the power of that creative force to obliterate any false belief, and thereby any false condition, and then any condition associated with that false belief.
And here I just remember this because I just read it. This statement on page 13 is the third from the bottom. It says, so far, neither science, revelation, nor philosophy has arrived at any condition which could disturb this proposition, right? Or the proposition of this invisible consciousness, this divine energy that everything is made of and partakes of. It goes on to say, and every day the physical sciences are more completely proving that the physical universe in which we live is more like a gigantic thought than anything else.
Yeah.
Gigantic thought more than anything else.
Now, let that sink in, folks.
Go.
Let that. I just want everybody to sit with that. Let that sink in for a minute. Say it again. Let everybody really hear that a minute.
So it says, basically, all the science, religion, and philosophy are moving to the point of proving the concept or the idea And they're stating it. And now this was written, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago. Yep. And now we have that proof even more that says the physical universe in which we live is more like a gigantic thought than anything else. And then he goes on to say, now, if that physical universe or that cosmos is a whole, is as a whole, is more like the gigantic thought than anything else, it follows that our immediate world is a part of that thought.
Yes. And our thoughts can influence and do influence and are constantly influencing the one thought.
Yeah, yeah. Ergo, the law of attraction, if you will, right? Yeah. Because it's all one thing, and when I get them in alignment, just like if you have magnets, if you take one magnet, cut it in half, if it's not in alignment, that you can feel the energy there, but they're opposing. But when they get aligned, boom, they flip around, they find the pole that it needs to be aligned with, and it comes together.
Exactly. So on the bottom of page 13, folks, the final paragraph on that page, the science of mind is a reinterpretation of the universe by a process of thought. We learn that there is one body, the body of right ideas. And the evil which binds man is not a principle within itself, nor a thing of itself. And most certainly not a person, but merely a false system of thoughts.
Yes.
And if it's a false system, then we can replace that with a right idea, a system of right ideas. This is what the Science of Mind teaches, a system of how to insert right ideas in place of systems of thought that no longer serve, that don't support, that are false, that are misleading. Continue on page 14. The Science of Mind does not necessarily create a new religion or sect, for it may be added to any spiritual system of thought, and it is a complements all.
Yeah, I mean that's brilliant. And the thing that sticks out to me is the whole idea of a system, right? When we talk about a universe or oneness, there is inherent in that thinking that there's an interrelationship, a system that makes the whole thing work, right? And so since we're studying religious science, I take the whole thing of my body. Yep. There are a bunch of systems in there: respiratory, elimination, circulatory, all these different systems that make up this oneness called me or call you. And when it is aligned and working properly, that system does its thing. And behold, each system within our body, although they different and perform different functionalities, they still operate off a pattern that's the same of intaking something and releasing something, intaking something and releasing something. That is it releasing those parts that are not useful to the system at hand, right? So it's able to dissect or take apart what it needs and release what it doesn't need.
Yes. All right, folks, so here's the thing. Z and I had a little bet. We didn't put any actually money on this, but we had a little competition of the mind going on, whether or not we'd be able to complete this whole section in just 1 hour of discussion, because it's so juicy, right? There's so much here. And in an attempt to complete this next few paragraphs in the next 10 to 12 minutes, I want to continue on that second paragraph on 14. For every science, there must be a technique or a way of proving its truth. Science of itself is a knowledge of laws and principles and systematic arrangements. Right? And this is the thing. We talk a lot about the marriage of science and spirituality, that place where science and faith come together. It is a huge aspect of what this philosophy is built upon. And that's why the word science is in there. We are metaphysicians, religious scientists of religion, of metaphysics, of consciousness. Now, it's nothing special. You're doing the same thing, we have made a pretty concerted effort and academic scholarly effort at this in many ways. And we're all out here proving, my point is, we're all out here proving these principles day by day, by day by day. Every science, there must be a technique or a way of proving the truth. Science of itself is a knowledge of laws and principles and systemic arrangements, and the techniques of any science is the way in which we use this knowledge of the laws and principles. There it is again. How are you going to use this?
And that's just brilliant, right? Because when we look at, we have these principles. We hear people always talking about these universal principles, right? And which are more broader. They're more overarching. And then from those principles, we extract laws.
Yep.
And we enact, not the right word, but we discover and we abide by these laws by taking these different elements in the universe and arranging them systematically so that they work. And I use this example all the time. There's a principle of electricity or principle of electrical energy. Mm-hmm. But using that principle, we have to extract certain laws and put them in a systematic arrangement where we can get electricity from water, from wind, from sun, from liquefied rocks, fossil fuel.
Algae in the ocean.
Yep. I mean, so we've taken a principle, we've extracted and understood some laws, and we've arranged those laws in a systematic way so that we prove that the principle is true.
Yes. So if our objective is to prove the principle, paragraph 3, applying this rule to the science of mind, it naturally follows that if there is such a principle as universal mind, we believe there is, and if it does work according to the law of cause and effect, we believe it does, and if thought, self-contemplation, or self-knowingness is that which stimulates its action. So let me redo that whole thing, right, real quick. It naturally follows that if there is a principle, such a principle as universal mind, and if that universal mind works according to the law of cause and effect, and if thought, self-contemplation, or self-knowingness is that which stimulates that law, the universal mind's action, then correct thinking can and must produce objective or visible results.
Ta-da! This is the way it works.
This is the way it works. It sounds like a lot, we know. And that is the beauty, and I think you see the joy in our faces. That is the beauty of Holmes and Science of Mind, is the longer you stay in this, the more you study this and go over this stuff again and again and again, and in different ways and in different classes and in different conversations, it gets pretty simple.
Yeah.
To understand up here. It becomes a little more difficult to take practice in the world. It takes time and effort to be able to really kind of activate this. But the promise is always there of instant change, instant manifestation, absolute instant demonstration of these principles.
And here's the rub on this one, right? He says that so eloquently, but if we took it and put it in a personal form, right, using what we talked about before about the principles and the laws and arranging them, each one of us individually are made from this universal principle of divine mind, ultimate spirit, call it how you feel, right? Whatever resonates with you. But when we're able to understand that and apply it and take those pieces to ourselves, we come up with individual people, just like we came up with fossil fuel and turbine fuel and energy and hydro and thermal, all these different variations of how we get energy. Apply that to yourself with the principle of the divine mind of God and the laws of right thinking and right action creates a definite result called you when they're put in the right alignment and they're held in the proper perspective.
Yes.
Without question.
Amen. All right, folks, before we wrap this up, we want to remind you real quick, we're working with the Extension Study Course Volume 1. It's available at the Science of Mind Archives. We left a link earlier in the program for this, and you can just do a quick search for Science of Mind Archives. We're going to work through the first 12 lessons. We anticipate it takes much more than 12 weeks to do that. We'll probably be here for the next 6 months working with just this one piece, because there's just so much. And he continues, we must lay even more stress on the use of the science of mind than we do on seeking to establish its principle. We've talked about this today. Go out and use it. He even says to make daily use of it. And at the bottom of that paragraph, too much study of any principle without making conscious use of it will lead to mere theorizing. And I'm sure we all wish practical results. I know we want practical results. I know you want a richer, fuller experience. Even if you're in the top 1%, even if you have everything you think, everybody has that desire to grow and learn and bend towards a greater experience. So to wrap up this final paragraph on this piece, we must come to see that the science of mind is an actual principle to be definitely used. That no matter how much good may exist in the universe, only as much good can come to you as you can conceive. Above all things, determine how to use this science. And before the year is over, you will have become an effective practitioner. How much good do you want to experience in your life? As much as you can conceive and embody is all yours.
All yours. And I love just a little bit before that, he kind of sets you up, right? He says that he say, they or we talk so much about the principles and use it so little. We permit ourselves to become confused by the introduction of contradictory ideas. We want to debate them. We want to wrestle to show how much we understand the principle. And then we spend too much time doing that, merely philosophizing and theorizing and speculating. And ultimately, we don't put it into practice. So we destroy the thing that we're trying to bring forth because we're not practicing.
Right.
And it just becomes this wishful thinking and this, as they say, there's the Islamic verse, they don't become a ass carrying books on your back. You got all the books on your back, but you can't produce none of it.
Right. Exactly. I don't know you've ever shared that one with me, and I don't know I've ever heard that one. I like it. Don't be an ass carrying all those books on your back. Go look at my bookcase real quick.
Yes. And I hope those that are here today, I hope they got something out of this, because for the next whatever, we're going to be going through this, because we didn't even start at the beginning of the book. The beginning of the book talks about creation. Now, yes, that was a little more ethereal than we wanted to step into on the first foray here, but we're going to go back there, because I think that helps us understand this universal principle called divine mind, spirit, God, ultimate consciousness. That is the whole how we create, and how we create from thought.
Right. Yes. All right, folks. I think we've done it, and we want to respect your time, and we thank you for sharing your time with us. We know it's precious. We know it's valuable. I echo what Rev BRZ is just saying. I trust you have found something of value here today, and if you have, please tell a friend. Let a friend know what we're doing. Come back and join us again next week. Invite a few friends with you next week. Share this video. Give it a like. Hit the buttons, whatever buttons you're looking at, whatever buttons are in front of you. Whether it's a ding-a-ling bell or a thumbs up, I don't know. Just to hit whatever buttons are there. But the important part really is, please, we invite you to stay engaged with this emerging spiritual community, the New Thought Media Network. And what we're doing here, we have hours and hours and hours of live broadcasting across the internet throughout the week. Do a quick search for hashtag New Thought Media Network, and we should show up on any of your favorite platforms. So we're going to get out of here for now. Z, thanks for sharing another great conversation with me. I look forward to next week. I trust we'll have something even more wild and fun to do next week.
Yes.
Yes, yes. All right, folks. That's all for now. We'll see you again next time. Peace.
Peace.